Now, the Hunt Palmer Show.
Yes! I feel like I've been waiting for this my entire life.
You're listening to the Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge.
Jolly good fun. Jolly good.
Locking down the middle of the day.
America's favorite daytime fun show.
Live from the Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge studio. This is Hunt Palmer.
Welcome in. Hunt Palmer coming to you from the Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge studio downtown in the capital city on this Monday. Hope your work week's off to a good start. We're brought to you by Gulf Coast Office Products. Jacob Beck and Cassie Spazzali back there on the ones and twos. Fired up. You're hanging out with us here on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge. Jerit Roser from the Bengal Tigers on 3 coming up in 15 minutes. He was down at the Manning Passing Academy over the weekend. Chatted with Garrett Nussmeier, Arch Manning, Kate Klubnik, I believe, as well. So we'll talk to Jerit coming up in 15 minutes. I've got some statistics I want to kind of pour through with the baseball team that I talked about on the website earlier today. We'll chat with Dr. Jeremy Burnham from Ochsner about all things injury, including Daniel Dickinson's hamate bone and how tough that must have been for him to play through over the last month of the season. LSU got a cornerback commitment, got some Saints news to get to as well. All that coming up over the next 2 hours. Appreciate you being with us. Let's start the way we start every day, our Genesis opening drive.
It's time for Hunt's Opening Drive, presented by Genesis of Baton Rouge.
Got some transfer portal news from LSU today. Not a surprise, but one that you were thinking about here over the last week. Ashton Larson has entered the transfer portal. Kendall Rogers from D1 Baseball reported it. And again, just not a huge stunner here. Larson came in as a very highly thought of high school prospect out of Overland Park, Kansas. He was a freshman All-SEC player in 2024, started 40 games for LSU that season, and was a starter in the outfield come regional time as a true freshman on that team a couple of years ago. Then he went off into the summer to Cape Cod and was the Chatham Anglers' most outstanding player, hit better than 300, really did a great job swinging the bat on the Cape. And then you show up here for fall ball and into the spring, and he really, really struggled early this season when given some opportunities. Just a lot of offers and a lot of swings and misses for him. And over time, Daniel Curiel, who was brilliant from start to finish, Chris Stanfield, Jake Brown, and Josh Pearson, and Ethan Fry just swallowed up the outfield at bats. And Ashton Larson was still counted on often as a pinch hitter from the left side against tough right-handed pitching. He had a huge swing of the bat against Alabama when LSU was down by 4 runs, and he hit a big 3-run homer coming off the bench in the first game of that series on a Thursday, but just was not a consistent starter on this team. Only played in 34 games, only had 39 at-bats on the season. And you look at next year's depth chart, and you look at what LSU brings back. Derek Curiel is going to be back. Jake Brown is going to be back. And now you look up and you say, well, maybe Chris Stanfield leaves, maybe he doesn't. Maybe Ethan Fry leaves, maybe he doesn't. But there just aren't a lot of opportunities in the outfield potentially for a player like Ashton Larson next year. So he's going to look elsewhere to play. And like there have been guys that have transferred out of LSU that I was like, that guy's just never going to help. Like that just, sometimes that happens. You recruit guys, you get a commitment as a sophomore or a junior, maybe you get a transfer portal audition from a smaller school and they come over going, this is just not going to work. Larson's not that. Like, I think if you put Ashton Larson in LSU's lineup next year, you started him every game in left field and hit him in the 6 hole, like Ashton Larson would probably hit 280 with 7 or 8 home runs. Like he is a good SEC level player. But at LSU, they just got a lot of good players. And there just aren't a ton of at-bats that you can be locked in for. So maybe he could have DH'd some next year. Maybe he could have played a little bit of left field if Jake Brown was playing right and Curiel moved over to center and Stanfield wasn't there. But that opportunity is not for sure. So Ashton Larson's going to look elsewhere. And I would assume that he's going to land at a power school. I don't know if maybe he goes back to Kansas where Dan Fitzgerald is the coach, go back home. I don't know if he wants to go play in the SEC and someone will offer him that kind of opportunity. We'll see. I did not ever hear a negative thing about Ashton Larson as a teammate. Like that had to be tough. You're a freshman all SEC and then you come into this year and you're on the bench. And when you're not on the bench, you're being asked to come in the 7th inning against a right-hander throwing 97 miles an hour and ask, hey, come in cold and get us a hit. Like, it was just a tough deal, but he was always involved in the celebrations. When he hit that big home run against Alabama, we had him for post-game, and he was great talking about, I'm not real concerned whether or not I start every day. I just want to help the team. And, that's just kind of the vibe this team had start to finish. Jake Brown was the same way. Josh Pearson was the same way. They called themselves the Goon Squad, coming off the bench to pinch hit. You had John Pearson in that mix from the right side of the plate. He was still a part of a championship team, and from the outside appeared to do so with a smile on his face and working hard every single day. I understand in what will be his draft year next year, wanting the opportunity to guarantee a little bit more playing time. And I think that's what you're looking at here. We'll see where he lands. I imagine it'll be somewhere that's pretty good. And I think he'll have a good year next year. I really do. It's not quite room in a crowded outfield for LSU. So that's the transfer portal news going out. Keep in mind, you have until tomorrow to get in the transfer portal, and then you can take as long as you need to pick the school you're going to, but you need to be in the portal by July 1, which is, of course, tomorrow. So Ashton Larson leaving LSU. I want to talk about a couple of names that are, one is not on the board anymore, and two that are on the board that I think LSU is connected to from a pitching perspective. Landon Mack was a really good freshman pitcher for Rutgers this past season. Right-hander, big spin rate on the breaking ball, mid-90s fastball, had good strikeout numbers, a good year at Rutgers as a freshman. He jumped in the portal. He was a guy that big-time schools wanted, and Tennessee ends up getting his services. I don't know if Mack ever made it to Baton Rouge for a visit or not. I'm not sure. They're pretty secretive about that kind of stuff. But the word is that LSU was in on Mack, and Tennessee wins out on that one. I think LSU is still in the market for some pitching. If you want to read my more in-depth thoughts on this, you can go to LouisianaSports.net. There's a mailbag piece up on the homepage right now that somebody asked about transfer portal in baseball, and I kind of went through my thought process. But I'll sum it up pretty succinctly here for a radio segment. I believe that LSU is still in the transfer portal. I believe there will be probably 3-4 more additions. You don't have to cut your roster down to its final form until Christmas, so you may be a little bit bloated in the fall. That can happen. We don't know what the draft is going to bring to the current roster or to the high school signing class, so there's no real way for me to track where they are in terms of the bodies that they have. There's too many variables. So I think that based on the composition of the team right now, what the signing class is likely to look like, and Jay Johnson saying on our airwaves, we're going to be selective with what we do in the transfer portal. I think maybe 2-3 more ads is reasonable. And to me, you're always looking for starting pitching. I can go around the horn right now and kind of lay you out what LSU's starting lineup is likely to look like. Some of the guys are going to be in there: Aaron Beatty, Brown, Milam, Stanfield if he comes back, Curiel, Fry if he comes back. There are some obvious guys that are going to be in the lineup. And from a pitching perspective, you do have a good foundation, but it's not necessarily proven from a starting capacity. The only starters that you have from SEC play coming back is Case and Evans. He made 3 SEC starts. Now, you might get Cowan back, and you obviously feel good about William Schmidt and Cooper Williams and Maverick Rizzi, and you feel like Jaden Newt can help you. And you've got a nice foundation there, and then the signing class has got a lot of guys in it as well. But I think they're probably still in the market for some pitching. They brought 2 left-handers in already, and there are 2 right-handers that I think are interesting for LSU from different ends of the country. Nate Taylor just finished his freshman year at Georgia. He only threw 8 1/3 innings for the Bulldogs, but he had 14 strikeouts and an ERA of 1. He's a real big talent and a guy that Wes Johnson was developing there in Athens. He's in the portal. I think LSU makes a lot of sense for Nate Taylor from the right side. And the other one is a fascinating prospect that is a little bit of a project, but one that you might want to get involved with, and that's Joey Volchko from Stanford. Volchko's ERA this year is ugly. It was 6. He had a 6 ERA. But you're talking about a guy that has a 98-mile-an-hour fastball, just an electric arm from the right side that is considered, entering next year, a potential first-round draft choice. Now, he's got to pitch better than he has in his first 2 years at Stanford, but he is in the transfer portal, and LSU has obviously had success taking guys from out west into Baton Rouge and getting the best out of them. Skeens is the obvious answer, but Anthony Ianson was pretty damn good. Gage Jump was named to the Futures team for the American League today, along with Tommy White. So that's a guy that they got from the West Coast. Thatcher Hurd comes from the West Coast as well. And so Joey Volchko may be looking to get out of Stanford into the Southeast. And if he is, I think LSU would be involved there. Jay Johnson's done a really good job of recruiting players from California. And Volchko, I think there's more in that tank. And if you can go from the resources you have at Stanford, which are incredible academically, but as far as baseball goes, you're talking about a big step up coming to the Southeast. Ask Braden Montgomery, who went from Stanford to Texas A&M and had a sensational final year before he became a first-round pick. I think Volchko makes some sense for LSU. So I'm not sure what the timeline is on these decisions. Guys don't have to make calls right now where they're going to go, but you're starting to see some of them. LSU has made 4 additions in the transfer portal. I think Nate Taylor and Joey Volchko make some sense for LSU, and we'll see if the Tigers can get involved in those two and maybe get one to the finish line here. I think the time where LSU had fallen behind, and maybe that hurt LSU with Mack if they did not get him to a visit in Tennessee, was able to do that. I know that he did visit Knoxville. That kind of done now because you had this past weekend. Now guys certainly aren't in school and can fly and come visit, and Jay Johnson can get on a plane as well and do some of those visits. So I think LSU is is rocking and rolling now. There was a time 7 days ago where we were just reacting to a national championship and you didn't have time to get guys on campus. Now LSU has had that time, so I expect that LSU will find a way to add a few more players from the transfer portal here to the roster for 2026, and we'll see. We'll react to them as they come. You can read more about it at louisianasports.net. There are some statistics that I looked up from LSU baseball that a lot of you read over on louisianasports.net. I'm going to get into those coming up in 15 minutes at 1:30. When we come back, Manning Passing Academy over the weekend down in Thibodaux. Jerit Roser was there. He also has had a conversation with Lamar Brown, whose decision date is coming up within the next 2 weeks. So we'll talk some recruiting, some Manning Passing Academy, some Garrett Nussmeier with Jerit Roser from On 3 when we come back on the Hunt Palmer Show.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Genesis of Baton Rouge. GenesisofBatonRouge.com is that website. Every car that's on the lot is online at GenesisofBatonRouge.com. When I say Genesis, you should think luxury vehicle. But when I say luxury vehicle, you shouldn't immediately go, well, I can't afford that. It's a luxury brand at a reasonable price. That's Genesis' model. And you're going to be so impressed from that experience from start to finish. You set foot on the lot. It's clean, it's comfortable, the facility's first class, the people that you work with, their brand ambassadors are exceptional, they're helpful, they're going to treat you like a guest and not a customer. You get behind the wheel, you'll sense the difference. You can do that test drive at the lot, Airline at Piku. They can come to you at your business or at your home. Try to make it as easy as they possibly can over at Genesis of Baton Rouge. Check out that inventory at GenesisofBatonRouge.com, GenesisofBatonRouge.com.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Gulf Coast Office Products.
Monday shows brought to you by Gulf Coast Office Products. All your printing, scanning, copying needs, Gulf Coast Office Products. Check them out online, gcopnet.com. That's gcopnet.com. All your printing, scanning, copying needs, it's Gulf Coast Office Products. Football World descended on where else? Thibodaux over the weekend for the Manning Passing Academy. Jerit Roser was there covering for On 3, part of the team over there at the Bengal Tiger. He gives us a little bit of time on the Jim's Firearms Hotline. Jerit, thanks for that time. How are you?
Yeah, Hunt, I'm doing well, man. Appreciate you having me on. How you doing?
I'm well. Let's chat some football. Give me a sense of the media presence down in Thibodaux. Obviously, Peyton and Eli and Archie have been doing this a long time, but now Arch is kind of like the headliner. What was it like down there?
Yeah, it's crazy every year, and this is the 29th annual Manning Passing Academy. Just crazy to see Thibodaux become such a focal point for the entire football world, where you have, I mean, I don't know the number of the high school prospects out there, but it is extensive, the amount of fields and portion of that campus that they take up, and then the amount of top college quarterbacks who are in a lot of cases now NFL prospects like Arch and Garrett Nussmeier, Lenore Sellers, Cade Klubnik, and on down the list that are all out there. And then obviously Peyton, Archie, Eli, Cooper, all there, and media from everywhere, particularly now that Arch has ascended the way he has. You have a heavy Texas media presence, and there's folks that come in to want to have the summer opportunity. If they're covering Clemson, it's an opportunity to go see Cade Klubnik be available for media in the middle of the summer, and on down the list through some other big programs. And so it is packed for sure, and kind of from every angle.
Let's talk about Jerit Nussmeier. I know that you were part of the media assembly there that got a chance to chat with him. It doesn't sound like LSU's running from many expectations entering this football season. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, Jerit talked about this being the most talented roster potentially that he's been a part of, but they're kind of trying to strike a little bit of a balance because they haven't shied away from talking about big expectations in recent years either, where, I mean, they've told us in the preseasons that they want to go compete for national championships. But Jerit, as he explained the talent level and the potential that he thinks the roster has, he also said that they've tried to kind of pump the brakes heading into the season on talking about that big picture quite as much, because obviously they've come out of the gates and lost 5 straight openers. And so they're trying to be a little bit more focused on let's be 1-0, let's win this week, and know that there are big goals, big things they hope to accomplish, over the course of the season, but they want to kind of take it, bite-sized steps now to get there.
Yeah, that's certainly a change in mentality, I guess. Is there anything specific that they're doing or talking about as far as getting off to a better start?
I believe Nuss, as I was walking his direction, mentioned something about things being posted around the facility, but I only kind of caught part of that. But essentially just keeping in the players' minds that, as high of expectations as there are for the LSU football program, that they've stumbled out of the gates these recent years. And so to make sure to go about some things a little bit differently and, focus on the task at hand. But I only caught kind of the tail end of one of his answers about that.
I'm curious. I know that he's the Louisiana State University quarterback and you're in the state of Louisiana for this, but did he feel like a big celebrity at this event?
I think so. I think Nuss handles a lot of that really well too. He's just wired in a way that it doesn't overwhelm him, and it's part of why he's so successful on the field and being the face of a program is that he's as much attention as he has on him at any time. He seems really comfortable in his own skin with it. You see the way that he handles some of the big media scrums after games and all those things, and just kind of focus on saying what he has to say and getting his answer across. He and Arch in particular, as great of quarterbacks as there were on hand among the college guys that were helping as counselors, they were the headliners of that group. And it was interesting to watch just the crowds immediately as the Peyton, Eli, Archie portion kind of wound down, rushing and seeing who was gathering around Nuss, who was gathering around Arch, who were, they were just a couple stations down from one another. They both drew big crowds, kept big crowds throughout. But Nuss had a kind of funny story about those two going to a Walmart to pick up some stuff for the camp, and Arch getting recognized by a young kid and Nuss not getting recognized, and how it was sort of a weird and funny moment. And he felt like the first time that anything like that has happened to him in Louisiana, where someone else kind of overshadowed him, because usually all those kids are gathering around Nuss, and he kind of got overshadowed in at least that moment for that kid by Arch.
It's going to be wild to see how Arch meets this celebrity when he actually gets his chance to play on the field. Another quarterback he got a chance to see down there was Cade Klubnik, who LSU will see on Labor Day weekend. Clemson's a playoff team last year. Did you hear kind of the same things from Klubnik that you did from Nussmeier about expectations there at Clemson?
Yeah, that was one of the stories I wrote Friday when I got back home that afternoon. Was I had a chance to talk to both of those guys about the dynamic of there's this huge opener. Some people look at it as the most high-profile non-conference game on the slate this schedule this fall, right out the gate. But at the same time, with all of these expectations of a top 10 matchup, potentially top 5 matchup, however it shakes out in the fall, both of those teams are trying to right some wrongs of recent openers, because Clemson has dropped its last 2. And so, similar to what I was saying about Nuss's mentality and the Tigers at LSU's mentality, it sounds like there's a similar approach from Clemson talking to Cade. And Cade also pointed to the amount of veterans that they bring back from last year's team, that he thinks that's going to be a big difference for those guys going into the season, to be able to kind of go in hitting the ground running a little bit better than maybe they have in some recent years, just because he feels like this is some of the best leadership group returning that they've had since he's been there.
I mean, a lot of NFL talent on the field that Saturday night in Clemson, South Carolina. It's going to be nuts. I wanted to shift gears a little bit here while we still have you. Jerit Roser's our guest, joins us. He's part of the team over there at the Bengal Tiger, the On3 network. Covers recruiting pretty extensively, and Lamar Brown is somebody that's getting a lot of headlines at this point based on his visit schedules, his upcoming decision date. So you've got a story up on the site about Lamar Brown. What can kind of tell us about the next 2 weeks of his life here?
Yeah, he's scheduled to make his commitment announcement on July 10th. Was originally looking at the 4th of July, but pushed it back a couple months ago, I guess, changing the timeline for himself. But he's wrapped up all of his official visits and is kind of in deliberation mode. When we talked on Wednesday, he said, it could be this weekend that he woke up and just kind of knew he wanted some time to talk with his family and figure it out. But the sense around Lamar has been for a while that LSU and Texas A&M in particular are in quite a slugfest, and that, different days, it seems like he may lean a little bit more one way or a little bit more the other on the next day. And so I think there are a lot of folks, not only in both fan bases, but on both staffs, who are kind of waiting with a little bit of bated breath, waiting to hear some clarity to the situation, because I know he's got some great opportunities at both, some great relationships at both. His final OV was to LSU, which, obviously a week and a half ago or whatever it was, there was some uncertainty. Was he going to make it there for that weekend or not? He went, said he was really happy he did. They gave him a great sense that could be a good fit, a good home for him. And he heard quite a bit from the staff, as well as, guys like Keelan Moses that signed in 25 or fellow commits like Richard Anderson. 26 prospects who are now committed in Richard Anderson. And so I think what I've been told for a while with Lamar from both sides is, if someone's overly confident that it's LSU, they're probably wrong, because there's no reason to be overly confident one way or the other. If someone's overly confident that it's A&M, they're probably wrong right now, because it's just too soon to know definitively. But it's been an interesting recruiting process, to say the least. He's got one hell of a spotlight on everything that he does, and it's been interesting for him to navigate a little bit at times too, where I think he's kind of ready to be done with it.
Any sense of what the lure is from Texas A&M? I mean, obviously there are some obvious things, but has he spoken about anything that specifically stands out about Texas A&M?
Yeah, I think there was a stretch where he really felt like they did a much better job prioritizing him in a lot of ways. And I think it's gone a little bit under the radar. It certainly was under the radar at one point, just sort of the rapport that he had with several members of that staff and the amount of trips that he was taking out there. And, we're not talking about OVs, obviously, where it's the bill is footed or whatnot. We're talking about him picking up and deciding he's heading out there on a given weekend. And, I think he's been to Texas A&M probably 10 times during the school year or something along those lines. It's a place that he's felt really comfortable, in terms of an environment and a fit in that regard. He seems really comfortable there, but also the relationships that are there. And there was a point where for him, and I think we've heard some other prospects say this at times, where, they maybe want to get out of state a little bit. They see an opportunity to experience something different, but also they have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder at times if they feel like there's an assumption that they're just going to go to LSU because they're a Baton Rouge kid, and some kids don't necessarily like that as much. And I think for Lamar, there was a stretch where he felt way more of a push, for whether it be, the A&M staff, A&M fan base, and, as opposed to an assumption from people here that maybe he would end up at LSU. I think LSU's done a great job making up a lot of ground there. I think, he's stated at points that LSU had kind of become his favorite, but it continues to be really back and forth between the two.
We'll just stay tuned. July 10th is that commitment day. You can read all about it over there at the Bengal Tiger, part of the On3 network, where Jerit and his team do an awesome job. Jerit, thanks for the time, man.
Yeah, anytime, hon. Appreciate you.
Appreciate you. That is Jerit Roser from On 3. I just, it's such a different feeling to me, the fan. Like, I'm not even talking about as a sports talk show host, just as a fan of LSU football. Whenever LSU would lose an in-state player to Alabama, I'd be like, that sucks, but like, I get it. They win the national championship every 2 years. You're going to lose somebody to Texas A&M. It just kind of makes me scratch my head a little bit. It's like, really? That's the pick? Interesting. Look, great school. I just not one I'm in a hurry to go enroll at. But that's to each his own, as they say. I think it's awesome when kids from Houston pick LSU over Texas A&M. So just a lot of bias, a lot of purple and gold glasses in that. But we'll see what Lamar Brown decides to do. It just feels like the air around it has some Aggie maroon to it, but we'll see. There's a lot of time to go before you sign on the dotted line on National Signing Day in December. I know that LSU would love to get Lamar Brown in the class. All right, Monday show is brought to you by Gulf Coast Office Products. When we come back, let's go through some interesting statistics. I went over like the entirety of LSU stat pages from the 2025 National Championship team, and some of these things that I found were a little bit surprising. So we'll talk about it coming up next.
The Hunt Palmer Show. This is The Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Gulf Coast Office Products.
Let's look at some stats. I put this piece up on LouisianaSports.net on Sunday morning. It was Sunday morning. Statistically speaking, just to look at some numbers that I thought were interesting from the stat sheet from LSU baseball. Kind of, let me throw some of these at you here. Would it surprise you? Well, let me just toss this to you.
All right.
I don't know if you read this story at LouisianaSports.net.
I did not read it.
Probably did not. Okay, great.
I do, but okay, I do read some of them. All right,
Okay,
don't.
good. It was on the weekend.
All right.
Who the most 3-hit games by an LSU Tiger this year was 11. Who do you think that was? Most 3-hit games.
Ooh. Well, I'm going to assume it's not a super obvious choice, but man, I tell you what, Chris Stanfield led the team in batting average in the SEC. I'll go with Chris Stanfield.
It's not Chris Stanfield. It's Jerit Jones had the most 3-hit games. Jerit Jones also led the team in hits. He had 90 hits to Derek Curiel's 89.
Okay.
I'm guessing a lot of fans would have gotten that one wrong.
Yes. As we talked about last week with the discourse over Jerit Jones.
You mentioned Chris Stanfield. He was next up on this list here. He did lead the team in SEC batting average at 325. How about this? He had 15 doubles on the season.
Yeah.
14 of them came in SEC play.
Yeah, I remember. I remember whenever the SEC, it was a couple of series into the SEC season, and I was saying, man, Chris Stanfield's hitting ninth. He's got like more. He hit like 4 doubles last weekend. Like, what's going on? He
just pulls doubles down the left field line. That's he doesn't hit the ball the opposite way very often, but he just yanks doubles down in the left field corner. Jake Brown only started 16 SEC games. And so to put that in perspective, what that does to your at-bat total, Derek Curiel, who often led off for LSU in SEC play, had 50 more SEC at-bats than Brown. And Brown still hit 6 SEC home runs, which was one short of the team lead, Jerit Jones, who obviously played in every SEC game. He had 7. Jake Brown basically got half the SEC at-bats and hit 6 home runs. That's telling. So interesting stuff there. This one stunned me. Not like it stunned me for a different reason than just the cold hard numbers, but Stephen Milam hit 211 in SEC play. What stunned me a little bit is that is 25 points lower than Michael Braswell hit in the SEC. Milam hit 25 points lower than Braswell in SEC play. That's hard to believe.
It is,
considering what we just watched for the last month.
But it was just almost the same thing that happened last year with Milam, where he just didn't. He was pretty average. Then when we got to the postseason, he just lit up.
He had 6 multi-hit games out of the 30 SEC games. He did it 6 times. He had 6 multi-hit games in the NCAA tournament, which was 11 games. whatever. Make that what you will. I thought this was just an interesting little note. Daniel Dickinson hit in every spot in the order except the 9-hole. We found out that he was being moved down pretty slowly in the order because of the hamate bone in the postseason. Jay Johnson didn't want to just, he's got a broken hamate bone. He did that on Friday. On Saturday, we'll go throw him in the 8-hole. He just kind of bumped him back. And because of that, he dumped all the way down into the 8th spot there at the end. Defensively, we know LSU was elite all year. They made multiple errors just 9 times in 68 games. By contrast, they played error-free baseball 35 times in 68 games. That's more than half the games on the schedule. LSU played error-free, and they only made multiple errors in 9 games. I think that's one thing that maybe we didn't talk about quite enough. LSU was an elite defensive team this year. The infield defense was exceptional. We know Braswell was great. Milam was awesome. Dickinson was fantastic too. Jerit Jones played well on the infield for most of the season. He made, of course, the one costly error there that felt like it was going to hurt him against Arkansas in the double play that he didn't catch. But he also made 2 really good defensive plays in that game as well. And in the outfield, Curiel was a go-getter, and Stanfield was running down everything as well. Stanfield had one bad day in College Station where he slipped once. He lost one of the lights, and that was a bad day. But other than that, LSU was awesome really all year. The first inning statistic got really, really heavily skewed in LSU's favor with some midweek games early in the season. They were just pounding teams in the first inning, and when the dust settled on the season, LSU outscored opponents 90-25 in the first inning. That was the largest disparity in any inning. I thought this was a telling stat about this LSU team and their makeup and the coaching, and I think the bullpen as well. LSU was 9-3 in one-run games. You've got to win close games. LSU won 9 of their 12 one-run games here. And then strikeouts. Huge deal. This is a feather in Nate Yeske's cap here. LSU pitching recorded at least 10 strikeouts in 48 of 68 games. In 20 of the 30 league games, so 2/3 of their league games, they had 10 strikeouts of the opposition. That's the second consecutive year LSU has led the country in strikeouts. And I find it amazing that LSU was able to lead the country in strikeouts last year, being eliminated in the regional. Because you didn't play a super, you didn't play in Omaha, so you were potentially losing like 5, 6, 7 games there. And LSU still led the country in strikeouts, which is incredible that they've done that for 2 years in a row. How about this, Beck? Jacob Myers threw 15 innings this year. How many hits do you think he gave up?
5.
4. He gave up 4 hits on the season.
But how many people did he walk?
He had some walks, all right? We're not talking about the walks here. We're talking about hits. And this is why Jay Johnson continues to suggest that Jacob Myers is going to pitch in the big leagues, and I think there's a chance of that. He's a reliever. He's not going to be able to start, and he's got to throw the fastball for more strikes. But his stuff is just very difficult to deal with. And for him to have pitched 15 innings and gave up 4 hits on the year is nuts. And unfortunately, like one of those hits was the Justin Thomas 2-run single in the 10th inning against Arkansas that looked like it was going to give the Hogs the win. They brought him in, and Thomas gets the hit. He did strike out the next 2 guys, leaving an insurance run on third base that ultimately allowed LSU to come back in the bottom half and win it on Jerit Jones' little single that just tipped off the glove of Cam Koshel, the second baseman. But Jacob Myers, 4 hits allowed in 15 innings of work. When I look at Cooper Williams and Kason Evans stats, they are better than I remembered. Like, we know Kason Evans had a great year, but like 52 and 2/3 innings, and he only allowed 44 hits. His ERA was hovering around 2 all year. That's incredible stuff from him. Cooper Williams, for the season, his ERA was 1.8. He allowed 4 earned runs in 20 innings. When I watch Cooper Williams, I don't see the elite stuff. And the point is, if you see a left-hander who's a true freshman that has elite stuff, like, they probably don't make it to campus, right? If you just look the part at 18 years old as a left-handed pitcher, like, somebody's going to get you in the draft. Like Robbie Snelling, who was in LSU signing class last year that didn't make it, Cam Caminetti that didn't make it from that class. Like, those guys are, you just notice those guys at the high school level. And Cooper Williams doesn't look like that, but his numbers were great. To post a season-long ERA of 1.8. And I think one of the things that stands out about Williams is he just throws a lot of strikes. Just throws it over the plate a lot. And if you do that, you just throw it over the plate, you've got a real good chance at the college level. LSU, when Cade Anderson and Anthony Ianson started, 31-6. That's pretty salty there. What's that win percentage? 31 out of 37. Let's just tap that into the old calculator. LSU played 840 baseball when Cade Anderson and Anthony Ianson were on the mound. That's a good recipe to go win a national championship when you got two guys that just don't lose very often. 31-6 when those two. LSU staff only allowed 7.3 hits per 9 innings. That was the third best in the SEC. And then I think this is really, really telling for LSU as well with how well they pitched in the clutch, how good the bullpen delivered, namely Cowan and Evans when they were called upon. LSU, when leading after 6, 45-2. 45-2 after 6 innings. You're turning games into 6-inning games to win 45 out of 47 when you lead. 40-1 leading after 7, 39-1 leading after 8. That's great stuff. LSU is 12-1 in the midweek, I looked up, and for Jay Johnson's 4 seasons, LSU is now 46-7 in the midweek. So that's really good work. You consider 46-7 is 53 games. That's almost a 56-game regular season. And you're talking about going 46-7 in the midweek without using your aces. Now you're facing lower level competition. We get it, but you're not stubbing your toe. And that's incredible stuff that Jay Johnson's done. We know the conference record has been really good outside of just that one block 2 years ago to start the season. That 15 game is a blemish, but it's the rest of the conference run has been really, really good for LSU. And that's something we pay attention to, maybe not the midweek as much, but to go 12-1 this year and 46-7 over the last 4 years is really, really good in midweek action. So I found that to be an interesting stat dump there. Put it up at the website, LouisianaSports.net. I know a lot of y'all read it. I certainly appreciate that. Today's story that came up is it's a mailbag, so it took your questions via Twitter. Some were about transfer portal edition, some were about football and the offensive line, some were about Jay Johnson getting a raise, some were about LSU and NIL. It's kind of a grab bag of topics as you would expect from the mailbag. If you want to read some of my answers on that, go check it out at LouisianaSports.net for free. All right, chugging right along here. Monday edition brought to you by Gulf Coast Office Products. All your printing, scanning, copying needs. Shout out to Trey Beal and the team over at Gulf Coast Office Products. They've got plenty of resources to best assist you, and you get a great relationship from their small company feel, even though it's expansive company. It's just the way they handle their business. Their customer service is second to none over at Gulf Coast Office Products. All your printing, scanning, copying needs, no matter what vertical market you are in, they've got clients who do the same thing. They know the needs, and it can affect your bottom line. If you don't have the right equipment, they're on site. They handle ours here at Guarantee Media. They can handle yours as well. It's Gulf Coast Office Products. Check them out online, gcopnet.com. We'll come back with Dr. Jeremy Burnham from Ochsner talking about Daniel Dickinson when we come back.
The Hunt Palmer Show. You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Gulf Coast Office Products.
Wrapping up hour number 1 here on a Monday. It's time for Sports Health, presented by Ochsner Andrews Orthopedics and Sports Medicine Institute. Bring back Dr. Jeremy Burnham, Medical Director of Sports Medicine and Section Head of Orthopedic Surgery over at Ochsner. Join us on the Jim's Fire and Sightline. Dr. Burnham, how are you?
I'm doing great, Hunt. Thanks for having me.
It is our pleasure. I want to talk Achilles because that's the news nationally with injuries. But locally, we found out after the season was over that LSU's Daniel Dickinson played the last month with a broken hamate bone. That's now the second most famous hamate break in LSU history. Warren Morris recovering from his probably trumps it. But what can you tell us about what that must have been like for Dickinson over the last month?
Well, gosh, I think when I found out about that, just like everyone else, is super impressed with his toughness. And, watching that game, had no idea. And the fact that, throughout all of those weeks, he's been able to get out there and compete and, just be a great Tiger is impressive. And I think that makes the story behind this national championship run even more special, when you had somebody playing through a fracture like that.
Is it one of those deals where it's just not going to get any worse? So if you can handle it, just go ahead and go?
Yeah, this is an injury that really happens batting most of the time. And, so for a right-handed hitter, it's usually your left hand, your hand that's touching the knob of the bat. And if you think about as you're swinging through and making that contact and your hand is kind of rolling over that knob, that's rolling over that part of the hand where the haymate is. And so if you look at people's batting gloves and things like that, oftentimes you can see a lot of wear and tear in that spot. And sometimes it's a stress injury that just, that repetitive stress over and over just breaks it. Sometimes it's something traumatic, but either way, it's a very painful thing. Most of the time, the treatment for it is to go in there and take that bone out. Sometimes you can go in there and fix it, but most of the time you're doing a surgery to excise that piece of bone. But then you're usually out about 6 weeks if you have surgery for that. So obviously, from a timeline standpoint, I think he probably looked at that and talked to his team and said, "Okay, I'm gonna push through that." So for several weeks after that, push through with a very painful injury and continue to get out there and contribute to the team is really impressive.
It certainly was. I saw an article from the Associated Press up in Indianapolis talking about Achilles injuries in the NBA. Kevin Durant was famous, and Tyrese Halliburton obviously in Game 7. Is that something that y'all have looked into, and what have you kind of learned about that?
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of things that go into these Achilles injuries. One of the things that you're seeing with Achilles injuries in the NBA especially is that this used to be something that you saw in people in their 30s and their 40s. And now, like with Halliburton, you're seeing this in their 20s. He's 25, I think, when he tore this. And so there does seem to be a little bit of an epidemic of these types of injuries happening earlier. There's probably a lot of things that go into that. I mean, there's certain antibiotics that are known to be associated with tendon ruptures. Probably, the types of ways that we're training and things like that may be contributing to it. But we really think that just like many of the other injuries that we're treating, it may be also because people are specializing earlier. And when you play one sport 12 months year-round, that just creates very unique stresses on your body's tissues that if you're rotating through different sports, you're going to stress your Achilles during one season, and then maybe you're going to change that up for a different type of sport. So I think we're seeing people specialize earlier and earlier, and they're putting that repetitive stress across one single joint over and over, and that may be one of the things that is contributing to some of these injuries.
Got about 2 minutes to go here, Dr. Burnham, but I always want to give you an opportunity to talk about what's going on over at Elite. I know a lot of travel baseball, some injuries, kids just out playing a lot that are getting hurt because they're out of school. What's going on over at Elite?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think that when we talk about the Achilles, I think the elbow is very analogous to that in a throwing athlete. So repetitive stress across the elbow earlier and earlier in people's career. In their sports career, we're seeing people specialize. And so obviously this is time of the year that unfortunately we're seeing a lot of elbow injuries. And there are a lot of things that go into it, but we think that specializing early is maybe one of the issues. And so I encourage everybody to keep cross-training. As a thrower, if you feel any medial elbow pain, you should not throw through that. A lot of sports, you need to play through certain types of pain and discomfort, but medial elbow pain in a thrower is not one of those. You always want to get that checked out. We have an orthopedic walk-in clinic at Elite. We're at 5444 Burbank on the corner of Burbank and Lee. And you can come 7 days a week, and you don't have to have an appointment. You can come in and get an x-ray. We do extended hours on Thursdays and Friday evenings, so it's open till 10 and 11 o'clock. And then on Saturdays and Sundays, we're open during the day as well. And so we're just trying to make it easy. If you want to get it checked out, maybe you've been having that pain and it's too inconvenient, you can't make an appointment. But, we want to make that something that's a little bit more seamless for you to come get appropriate care.
Go check them out over there at Elite on Burbank. Walk-ins are obviously welcome 7 days a week. Dr. Burnham, we appreciate some time. Have a great week.
Great talking to you. Thanks, son.
Dr. Jeremy Burnham from over at Ochsner. At Ochsner Andrews Orthopedic and Sports Medicine Institute, we know that sports injuries can be unpredictable, but one situation you can protect yourself from is heat illness. Some key signs to look out for include excessive sweating, dry mouth, dizziness, fast heart rate, or a change in mental status. Feel any of these symptoms, stop physical activity immediately, find a place to cool off, and replenish fluids. To learn more about sports injury prevention and treatment, visit ochsner.org/BRortho. Appreciate Dr. Burnham for a little bit of time. That Danny Dickinson story, I did not see that coming, and I completely missed. I asked Cauble about this last week. I just didn't see the brace on his hand. Maybe when we went to practice, when they practiced at, and I never know how to say this to adequately describe it, but at Omaha's practice field, like the college, the Omaha Mavericks that LSU played against, and we went to practice. I don't remember seeing Dickinson having anything on his hand. I never remember seeing it, and maybe I'm just not paying attention closely enough. I certainly wasn't filming anything, but that's just an incredible display of toughness. It had to be so disappointing for him when he found out after that 2-home-run game in Friday the regional that, hey, your hand's broken. Because if I hear that, I'm thinking, well, then I can't play. But he obviously went out there and played, and to have it, I guess it was on his left hand, as Dr. Burnham mentioned there, the lead hand when you're in it's the hand obviously that you field with, and Dickinson was there to field the last ground ball and toss it to Stephen Milam for the 4-6-3 double play. Which, by the way, I've watched that highlight a bajillion times, as most of you have, to win the national championship. Very, very cool ending play. Like, he liked to strike out. So LSU's had some walk-offs, 2 of them. That's really, really cool. The double play is just a really good aesthetic, and they turned it so smoothly. Love that. Love that Dickinson was able to play through all that. So we appreciate Dr. Burnham for a little bit of time here on this Monday. When we come back, got plenty to talk about here in hour number 2. We'll pause for SportsCenter. LSU got a cornerback commitment over the weekend. I'll tell you about it and what that cornerback room looks like. Hope your work week's off to a good start. See you for second hour next.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Highland Insurance Group, HighlandIG.com is that website. If you're a business owner, if you're a CFO, a risk manager, and you're in charge of the insurance program, and you feel like you pay a lot for your insurance, have you tried a captive? Have you looked into that? Has your broker approached you to see if you are a fit for a captive? It could be a complete game changer as far as your risk management and your bottom line go. And you've got to qualify for it, and you've got to work with a broker who knows how to get you in. And the Highland Insurance Group can do it. Jonathan Carbo and his team work with captives every day. And they can take you and see if your business is a fit for that captive. It's a way of essentially self-insuring yourself amongst a group. And if your risk management is good and your loss history is good and you fit, it can be completely a game changer as far as your insurance expenses go. Check them out here in Baton Rouge or online at HighlandIG.com. It's the Highland Insurance Group. You can find them online at HighlandIG.com.